Before we end this journey about the history of Islam in Barbados, I want to leave you with something you can carry in your chest as a Muslim. This story of Islam in Barbados traces back to a historian named Al-Mas'ud in the 10th century, who wrote about a navigator from Cordoba named Khashkhash ibn Saeed ibn Aswad. Around the year 889 AD, he reportedly crossed the Atlantic and returned with treasures. There are even claims of coins found in the Caribbean linked to that era, and speculation that Muslims may have touched the Americas long before Columbus ever set sail. This belongs to broader discussions on pre-Columbian Muslim contact with the Americas. Scholarly research does not support any definitive evidence of Muslim arrival to Barbados in the 9th century. But that does not mean we must swallow the story told by those who colonized, erased, and rewrote. Allah gave you your own language, your own mind, your own soul. Not to blindly accept the words of those who spent centuries trying to silence Islam, but to seek truth. The Qur'an reminds us, "So do not weaken and do not grieve, and you will be superior if you are true believers." Qur'an 3:139. If the world dismisses Islam's victories, you don't need to argue or stress over it. Remember, this world is temporary. What matters is that everything belongs to Allah alone. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because colonial archives do not preserve it does not mean it never happened. Europeans erased and silenced African and Muslim presence all over the world. Of course, they would want Barbados's story to begin with Indians in the 1900s, because that erases the Muslims who arrived in chains centuries before. We know for a fact that from the 1600s onward, enslaved West African Muslims lived on this island. They prayed in secret. They whispered Qur'an verses under their breath. They taught their children to remember Allah until overseers broke it from their hands. This is the truth that cannot be denied. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Islam began as something strange and will return to being strange. So glad tidings to the strangers." Sahih Muslim. Those enslaved Muslims were strangers in a strange land, yet they clung to Allah. Their hidden worship was not forgotten. It was written with angels' ink. Now, why does 889 AD still matters? So when you hear claims like 889 AD, and historians call it speculative, don't think of it as a fight over numbers. Think of it as something bigger, a reclaiming of victory. It is Muslims around the world refusing to let Islam be erased from the story of humanity. Whether in Barbados, in the Americas, or anywhere else, the possibility that Islam touched these lands before Columbus is a reminder of how far the light of Allah has always stretched. And above all, know this: Allah is the best historian. He is the one who kept the truth alive, even when Europeans tried to bury it. He is the one who will make every oppressor read their own book of deeds on the day of judgment, even if they never realize the weight of their actions. The Qur'an says, "And we will place the scales of justice for the day of resurrection, so no soul will be treated unjustly at all." Qur'an 21:47. They may have buried our ancestors' prayers under whips and chains, but Allah never lost track of a single Allahu Akbar whispered in the cane fields. So as you carry this history, remember, Barbados does not begin with silence. Barbados begins with faith, whispered in chains and shouted in mosques. Whether it was 2 people praying in secret or a whole community building Jama Mosque, Allah's light has always been there. Take pride in this. Walk with your chest lifted, because no matter what they erased, Islam has always been written into the heart of this land, and Allah is its eternal guardian. When the year 1910 emerged, a man named Bashart Ali Dewan stepped onto Barbados with more than just his life's possessions. He carried a dream shaped by faith and homeland. A Bengali Muslim from West Bengal, he became the first documented Muslim to settle in Barbados. His arrival marked the beginning of a new community, one built not through power or conquest, but through quiet courage and belonging. Imagine him walking off the boat onto the warm shores, unsure of what lay ahead. Not just an island, but a future. In a place where no mosque had yet called to prayer, he carried the sound of the adhan inside his heart, perhaps whispering, Allahu Akbar, under his breath. Over time, he fell in love, not only with the land, but with a local woman whose world was different from his own. Their marriage became more than a union. It became a bridge between two cultures, two traditions, and two families. Through that love, Islam began to plant its roots in Barbadian soil. But the claim that Bashart Ali Dewan was the first Muslim in Barbados erases something much older and much deeper: the African Muslims who were brought to the Caribbean through slavery long before 1910. From the 1600s onward, enslaved West Africans were dragged to Barbados in chains. Among them were the Wolof, Mandinka, Hausa, and Fulani, peoples of Senegambia, Nigeria, and Guinea, where Islam had already been rooted for centuries. Torn from their homelands, their Qur'an was in their memory, their prayer carried in their bodies, their dignity tied to Allah. But when they reached the plantations, their faith was met with iron, cruelty, and calculated silence. They were not only enslaved in body, their voices were stolen. Slave owners and companies, including the Dutch and others, feared the light of Islam. Just as in South Africa and the Malaccan Sultanate, they commanded, "Do not teach the natives to read, do not teach them the words of Allah, do not let them write." Literacy meant resistance, faith meant strength. So they broke books, silenced teachers, and outlawed what they could not understand. Muslim men and women were forced to work the cane fields under the lash, their tongues heavy with unspoken prayers. Children who once traced Arabic letters in the sand of West Africa now trace sugar dust in Barbados, forbidden to learn, forbidden to remember aloud. Many still whispered Qur'an verses when overseers turned their backs. Some carried fragments of Arabic names, etched into memory like scars, even when stripped of books and teachers. That is why today, in the slave databases of the Caribbean, you can still find the echoes of Islamic names. Abdul, Musa, Fatima, Amina, scattered like broken glass. The names survived, but the history behind them was smothered. The culture, the recitation, the poetry, the schools, the prayers of whole communities were buried under the whip of Europe. History was stolen, culture erased, voices silenced by design. And yet, Islam never left Barbados. Even if it was only one mother whispering Bismillah before feeding her child, even if it was two men facing the rising sun in secret prayer, Allah's name still pulsed through the soil of that island. They could burn the books, chain the bodies, and outlaw the words, but they could not strip Allah from the hearts of the enslaved. So when Bashart Ali Dewan arrived in 1910, he was not the first Muslim. He was simply the first free man who could be documented, who could marry and live openly as a Muslim. But long before him, Islam had already been planted, in the tears of children, in the broken backs of men, in the whispered prayers of women who carried Allah's light under the shadow of the lash. That is the truth. Islam has always been in Barbados. It lived in the ache, the silence, and the survival of the enslaved. And even if their creations were buried, their faith was never extinguished. Their heartbeat is still there, pulsing in the land, waiting to be remembered. As the history unfolds from the 1600s to the 1900s, and from the struggles of slavery to the sacrifices of the 1950s pioneers, we arrive at today, where the Muslims of Barbados are still standing, still praying, still teaching. It is nothing short of beautiful that on this small island, mosques now rise where once there were only whispers. The Jama Mosque on Kensington New Road, the Medina Mosque on Sobers Lane, the schools, the Qur'an classes, the calls to prayer. All of these are living proof that Allah's name cannot be erased. What began with sweat, sacrifice, and the determination of a handful of believers has blossomed into a community that carries the Qur'an into the hearts of their children. To the Muslims of Barbados who wake before dawn to fill their masjids with prayer, they teach children how to recite the Qur'an. They gather the youth and remind them of Allah in a world that tries to distract them. This is your legacy. Every word taught, every prayer whispered, every heart you turn towards Allah is a victory written in the book of deeds. What greater honor is there than to carry the knowledge of Allah into the corners of an island once scarred by silence? What greater beauty than to plant seeds of faith where others once tried to uproot it? Today, the Muslims of Barbados are not just surviving, they are thriving, teaching, guiding, and preserving Allah's light for generations yet to come. And so, as this journey closes, let it be said with pride, Barbados, an island once filled with pain and erasure, now carries within it the sound of the Qur'an. It is a song of survival, of victory, of love for Allah, and it shines through the Muslims who continue to live, pray, and teach upon its shores.